Still making your little soaps? My Aunt Georgina said that every single Thanksgiving for 9 years straight, the same way a clock chimes on the hour. Predictable, reliable, accrual without effort. She said it while holding a glass of Merlot in one hand and her opinion of me in the other, and the entire family laughed like it was the first time they'd heard the joke. It wasn't. What they didn't know, what Georgina certainly didn't know, was that the candle sitting on her own bathroom vanity, the one she'd posted about on Facebook calling it the most divine scent I've ever experienced, the $68 candle in the hand-blown glass vessel with the gold label, that was mine. She'd been buying my products for 3 years. She just didn't know my name was behind them. My name is Paloma Vega. I'm 34 years old. I live in Santa Fe, New Mexico, in an adobe house on Canyon Road that I bought in 2023. The walls are 18 inches thick. The ceilings have hand-carved vigas, the wooden beams that have been holding up New Mexico roofs for 400 years. In the mornings, the light comes through the east-facing windows and turns the plaster walls the color of warm honey, and the whole house smells like piñon and the residual sweetness of whatever fragrance I was testing the night before. This is where I live. This is also where Solène was born, on a kitchen table covered in newspaper and essential oil stains, in a rented casita on Agua Fria Street that cost $850 a month and had a stove that only worked on 3 of 4 burners. Solène is a luxury fragrance and home goods company. We make candles, reed diffusers, room sprays, and a skincare line that launched last year. Our products are sold in 14,000 retail locations across the United States, including Nordstrom, Anthropologie, Crate and Barrel, and 340 independent boutiques. Our annual revenue last year was $36 million. We have 42 employees, a 15,000 square foot production facility in Albuquerque, and a flagship store on the plaza in Santa Fe that tourists line up for on Saturday mornings. Oprah's team put our Desert Moonlight candle on the favorite things list in 2023. Martha Stewart ordered a custom set for her house in Maine. A Kardashian posted about us, which I'm told is significant, though I wouldn't know because I don't watch reality television. I built all of this from soap. Specifically, from goat milk soap made in a kitchen in Santa Fe by a 25-year-old woman with $600 in her bank account and a family that thought she was wasting her life. Let me go back. Because the candle on Georgina's vanity has a story behind it that stretches all the way back to a childhood in Albuquerque and a family that measured success in one very specific, very narrow way. I grew up in the South Valley of Albuquerque, in a neighborhood where the houses had flat roofs and stucco walls and yards full of juniper and chamisa. My father, Roberto, was a plumber. My mother, Yolanda, was an office manager at a pediatric clinic on Central Avenue. They were good people, hardworking, Catholic, the kind of parents who showed up to every school event and put a 20 in your birthday card and expected you to write a thank you note by hand. They wanted me to be a nurse or a teacher or a dental hygienist, something stable, something with a schedule and a benefits package. Something that made sense. My Aunt Georgina was my mother's older sister. She lived in Rio Rancho, the suburb north of Albuquerque where the houses were newer and the grass was greener, literally, because people out there watered their lawns even during drought restrictions, which tells you everything you need to know about Georgina's relationship with appearances. She was a regional sales manager for a medical device company. She made $140,000 a year, which in New Mexico in the 2010s was enough to qualify as wealthy by local standards. She drove a white Cadillac Escalade. She wore David Yurman bracelets. She had her nails done every 2 weeks at a salon in Cottonwood Mall, and she talked about her quarterly bonuses the way some people talk about their children, with pride, frequency, and an assumption that everyone else cared as much as she did. Georgina had one daughter, my cousin Maricela, who went to UNM, got a degree in marketing, and took a job at a tech company in Austin. Maricela was Georgina's masterpiece. Her proof of concept. Every family gathering included an update on Maricela's salary, Maricela's apartment, Maricela's boyfriend who worked in private equity, Maricela's 401k. Georgina talked about Maricela the way a museum docent talks about the collection. With reverence. With ownership. with the clear implication that the rest of us were visiting ours and she was the permanent exhibit. And then there was me, the one who made soap. I didn't start out making soap. I started out doing what I was supposed to do. I enrolled at the University of New Mexico in 2009. I declared a major in nursing because my mother said it was a forever career. I lasted 3 semesters. Not because I failed. My grades were fine. B's across the board. But every time I sat in a lecture hall listening to someone explain pharmacokinetics or fluid balance, my mind drifted. It drifted to smell, to texture, to the way certain combinations of ingredients could create something that didn't exist before. I'd been mixing things since I was a kid. Lotions from recipes I found in library books. Lip balms from beeswax and coconut oil, made in my mother's kitchen in mason jars that she said made the whole house smell like a hippie store, which was not a compliment. I dropped out in 2011. My father was disappointed. My mother was worried. Georgina was delighted, though she'd never admit it, because my failure was a data point that confirmed her worldview. Some people are built for success, and some people aren't. I was the control group. I moved to Santa Fe because it was far enough from Albuquerque to feel like leaving, but close enough to drive home when I needed to. Santa Fe is a city that understands makers. Artists, potters, weavers, jewelers, people who work with their hands and sell what they create. That's the economic and spiritual backbone of the place. In Albuquerque, when I told people I made soap, they asked when I was going to get a real job. In Santa Fe, they asked where they could buy it. That difference saved me. I worked at a restaurant on Marcy Street called The Shed, a tourist institution famous for their red chili enchiladas and their margaritas that tasted like they were made with real intention and a generous hand. I waited tables during the day. The lunch rush was chaotic. Tourists from every corner of the world packed into a converted hacienda with low ceilings and uneven floors, and I'd come home smelling like green chili and tequila with aching feet and $80 in tips. At night, I made soap. Goat milk soap. I'd found a supplier in Española, about 25 miles north on Highway 84, a woman named Dolores Montoya who kept alpine goats on 5 acres of scrubland between the river and the mesa. She sold the milk in gallon jars from her front porch. Her dogs barked at every car that pulled in, and she always had a pot of something simmering on the stove that made her house smell like oregano and earth. The milk made the soap softer, creamier, with a lather that felt like something expensive even though it cost me $3 a bar to make. I experimented obsessively. Lavender and chamomile, cedar and vanilla, pinyon and wild sage. I'd mix fragrances the way a painter mixes color, not from a formula but from instinct, layering scents until they became something you couldn't pull apart into individual ingredients. I failed often. There was a batch with eucalyptus that smelled like a hospital floor. A rosemary blend that was so strong it gave Dolores a headache from 3 feet away. A honey oat bar that looked beautiful but left a film on your skin that felt like you'd washed with cooking oil. Failure is part of the process. The part nobody posts about. I sold my first batch at the Santa Fe Farmers Market in 2012. The market operates under the Railyard Pavilion, a big steel and wood structure near the train tracks where vendors set up every Saturday morning. I had a folding table I'd borrowed from the shed. A hand-painted sign on a piece of reclaimed wood that said Palomas, in letters I'd tried to make look elegant, but that really just looked like a determined 22-year-old had painted them at midnight. 24 bars of soap wrapped in brown paper and tied with twine. I sold 18 of them in 3 hours. A woman in turquoise jewelry and a linen shirt that probably cost more than my rent bought 4 bars, held one to her nose for a long time and said, "These smell like what my grandmother's house should have smelled like." I made $126. I went home to my casita on Agua Fria Street, sat on the floor of the kitchen, and cried. Not from sadness. From the specific relief of discovering that the thing you love making is also the thing other people want to have. The Thanksgiving comments started that year. I'd driven down to Albuquerque for dinner at my parents' house. Georgina was there, naturally, seated at the head of the table, like she'd arrived by palanquin. When my mother mentioned that I was doing a little business on the side, selling soap at the farmer's market, Georgina looked at me over the rim of her wine glass and said, "Oh, that's sweet." like a hobby. My father said nothing. Maricela, who was home from Austin, smiled politely. My mother changed the subject. The next year, it was still doing the soap thing? Delivered with the same tone you'd use to ask a child if they were still pretending to be a dinosaur. The year after that, Paloma, when are you going to get a real job? And the year after that, the one that became the annual tradition, still making your little soaps? Always followed by a laugh. Always followed by someone, usually my mother, gently steering the conversation elsewhere. Always followed by silence from me. Not because I didn't have an answer. Because the answer was growing too large to fit through the door of that dining room, and I was waiting for the right moment to open it. Here's what happened between the farmer's market and the moment Georgina lit my candle in her bathroom, without knowing whose hands had made it. 2013, I moved from soap to candles. Not because I stopped loving soap. Because I followed the fragrance. I'd been blending essential oils for years, learning the architecture of scent the way a musician learns harmony, bass notes, middle notes, top notes, how they interact, how they evolve as they burn. A lavender and sage soap led me to a lavender and sage candle, which led me to realize that candles were a category with enormous margin and almost no craft-level competition at the luxury end. Everyone was either mass-produced or handmade but ugly. Nobody was occupying the space between artisan integrity and premium aesthetics. I saw that gap the way an architect sees an empty lot. Not as nothing, as potential. 2014. I named the company Solène. It's not a real word. I invented it. It sounds like solemn but softer, like something French that means grace or stillness. I wanted a name that sounded like it belonged on a shelf at Barney's, not because I was pretending to be something I wasn't, but because the product deserved packaging that matched its quality. I designed the first label myself. Gold foil on matte black. Hand-blown glass vessels made by a glassblower in Tesuque, Pueblo named Raymond, who'd been making traditional pottery and glass for 30 years. The first Solène candle was called Pinion Noir, Pinion Pine and Black Amber. It smelled like a New Mexico evening. I sold it for $48. 2015, a buyer from a boutique in Scottsdale, Arizona, found me at the Santa Fe International Folk Art Market, which wasn't even the right market for candles, but I'd set up a table outside the entrance because I couldn't afford a booth inside. She ordered 200 units. I made them all by hand in my casita kitchen. It took me 3 weeks. My apartment smelled like a forest fire. My hands were covered in wax burns. It was the happiest I'd ever been. 2016, Solène was in 12 stores. Revenue, $89,000. I hired my first employee, a woman named Camille who'd been laid off from a spa in Taos and knew more about essential oil sourcing than anyone I'd ever met. She became my production manager. She's still with me. 2017, 47 stores. Revenue, $340,000. I moved production out of my kitchen and into a rented warehouse space in Albuquerque's North Valley, next to a furniture maker and an auto body shop. The warehouse smelled like sawdust and Bondo and, increasingly, like bergamot and sandalwood and a cedarwood and vanilla blend that would become our bestseller. 2018, I got into Anthropologie. 1 store, in Santa Monica. A test run. The buyer, a woman named Sloan who wore all black and spoke in sentences that sounded like brand strategy, had found us at a trade show in Las Vegas, where I'd spent $2,400 on a booth I could barely afford and stood for 3 days talking to people who walked past me like I was invisible. Sloan stopped. She picked up Desert Moonlight. She smelled it for a long time, longer than anyone had ever smelled one of my candles. Then she said, "This doesn't smell like a candle. It smells like a place." That was the moment everything shifted. They ordered 500 units of Pinion Noir and Desert Moonlight. Desert Moonlight sold out in 3 weeks. Anthropologie expanded the order to 40 locations. I stood in my warehouse in the Sawmill District and stared at the purchase order on my computer screen, and Camille came over and said, "Paloma, why do you look like you've seen a ghost?" I said, "Because the ghost is the girl who sold 18 bars of soap from a folding table, and she can't believe where she's standing." 2019, 600 stores. Revenue, $4.2 million. I hired 11 more people. I leased a proper production facility, 8,000 square feet on 2nd Street in Albuquerque's Sawmill District. We had a pouring line, a curing room, a fragrance lab with ventilation that actually worked, unlike the kitchen window I'd been relying on for years, and a shipping department. I stopped making candles with my own hands. That was harder than I expected. Not physically, emotionally. Making something yourself and then letting other people make it for you requires a kind of trust that feels like letting go of a child's hand at the school door. You know they'll be fine, but your palm remembers the grip. 2020. Despite everything, we grew. Candles, it turns out, are a pandemic product. People stuck at home wanted their homes to smell better. They wanted comfort in a jar. They wanted to light something and watch it glow and pretend the world outside wasn't falling apart. I understood that impulse more than most people. I'd been lighting candles in moments of uncertainty since I was 22, sitting in a casita with a stove that barely worked, watching a flame and telling myself the light meant something. Online sales tripled. We redesigned the website in 3 weeks. I hired a photographer, a young woman from Taos named Soledad, who shot our products in natural New Mexico light, on windowsills and adobe ledges, and against the sunset on the Jemez Mountains. Those photos became our signature. People didn't just buy candles from us. They bought the light. Revenue hit $9 million. We launched the Reed diffuser line. Nordstrom called. Not the other way around. A buyer named Vivian, who I later learned had found us through an Instagram ad, sent me an email that said, "We'd like to discuss carrying Solène in our home fragrance department." I read the email 4 times to make sure it was real. I showed it to Camille. She screamed. I did not scream. I made a spreadsheet. Because that's what I do when something is so big I can't hold it emotionally. I put it in columns and rows and let the numbers carry the weight until my heart catches up. By 2022, we were in 8,000 locations. Revenue crossed $22 million. I expanded the production facility to 15,000 square feet. I hired a CFO, a man named Aurelio, who'd spent 20 years in consumer goods and who looked at our growth projections and said, "Paloma, you're not running a candle company. You're running a lifestyle brand. The only question is whether you know it." I told him I'd known it since the woman at the farmer's market told me my soap smelled like her grandmother's house. He nodded and said, "Good. Then let's build like we mean it." And during all of this, through every milestone, every new store, every late night in the warehouse, and every early morning in the fragrance lab, I went home to Albuquerque for Thanksgiving and sat at my parents' table and listened to Georgina say, "Still making your little soaps?" I never corrected her. Not once. People ask me why. They assume it was strategy. A long game. A setup for some grand reveal. It wasn't. The truth is simpler and sadder than that. I didn't correct her because she never created the space for correction. When Georgina said little soaps, she wasn't asking a question. She was making a statement. A verdict. The sentence was a wall, not a door. And you can't walk through a wall. You can only build around it. There was also another reason, one I'm less proud of. Part of me liked having the secret. Part of me liked sitting at that table, invisible, underestimated, dismissed, while the thing I'd built grew larger than anything Georgina had ever touched. Her medical device career topped out at $140,000 a year. My little soaps were pulling in 250 times her annual income. I didn't need to tell her. The gap spoke for itself. Even if nobody at that table could hear it. My mother knew something. Not everything. She knew the business had grown. She knew I'd moved into a nicer place. She knew I wasn't struggling. But she didn't know the scale. I'd asked her not to Google it, and she respected that, though I suspect she did anyway because one Christmas she gave me a look that was 60% pride and 40% Mija. What are you not telling me? My father definitely didn't know. Roberto Vega is a man who could drive past a billboard with my face on it and not notice because he'd be looking at the road, which is both his greatest strength and his most infuriating quality. Maricela knew. That's the twist nobody saw coming. Maricela, Georgina's golden daughter, The one with the tech job in Austin and the private equity boyfriend, and the 401k that Georgina narrated like a quarterly earnings call. Maricela had been buying Solène candles since 2019. She'd found us through Anthropologie. She'd ordered Desert Moonlight online, and when the package arrived, she'd noticed the Santa Fe address on the shipping label. She'd Googled the company. She'd found my name. She didn't tell her mother. She didn't tell anyone. She just kept buying the candles. And every time Georgina mentioned Paloma's Little Soaps, Maricela would look at me across the table with an expression that was half smile, half secret. We never discussed it. We didn't need to. Some alliances are formed in silence. Now, let me tell you about Christmas. December 2024. My parents' house in Albuquerque. The same house I'd grown up in. The same flat roof. The same stucco walls. The same kitchen where I'd made lip balm from beeswax at 14 and listened to my mother call me a hippie. The farolitos were out, those small paper lanterns with candles inside that line the walls and rooftops of every house in New Mexico during the holidays. The luminarias along the sidewalk. The smell of pozole simmering on the stove and the dry cedar scent of the pinyon fire in the Kiva fireplace. Christmas in New Mexico smells like nowhere else on earth. The family was all there. My parents. Georgina and her husband, Frank, a quiet man who worked for the county and whose primary conversational contribution was agreeing with Georgina. Maricela, home from Austin. My brother, Tomas, who lives in Las Cruces and teaches high school math, and whose wife, Renata, always brought tamales that were better than my mother's, but nobody was allowed to say that out loud. We did the gift exchange after dinner. My family does Secret Santa, which means everyone draws a name and buys one gift for that person. The budget is $75. Georgina always exceeded it. Not by accident, by design. Her gifts were always conspicuously generous, wrapped in paper that looked like it came from a boutique in Nob Hill. Maricela drew Georgina's name. She handed her mother a box wrapped in tissue paper. Georgina opened it with the careful theatricality of someone who treats unwrapping as a performance. Inside was a candle, a Solène candle, the Desert Moonlight, in our signature hand-blown glass vessel with the gold label, the one that had been on Oprah's list, the one that Nordstrom sold for $68, the one that smelled like jasmine and white musk and the faintest trace of sage, like a Santa Fe evening captured in wax. "Oh, Maricela," Georgina said, holding the candle up to the light. "This is gorgeous. I've been wanting to try this brand. My friend Deborah has one, and she won't stop talking about it."
Solène, right?
"It's supposed to be incredible." "It is," Maricela said. She looked at me. That half smile. That secret. Georgina turned the candle around in her hands. She read the label. She smelled the wax. She held it like it was a jewel. "This must have cost a fortune. Where do they make these?" "Santa Fe," Maricela said. "Oh, how charming. Small batch, I bet. Very artisanal." "Something like that." I was sitting on the couch, holding a cup of champoredo my mother had made, watching this scene unfold with the detached calm of someone watching a play they'd already read the script for. The pinyon fire crackled. The farolitos glowed in the windows. My mother was cleaning up wrapping paper. My father was asleep in his chair, which was his Christmas tradition and possibly his most honest form of self-expression. Georgina set the candle on the coffee table and beamed at it. "I'm putting this in my bathroom, right on the vanity. I'm going to light it every night before bed." "You should check out their website," Maricela said, her voice carefully neutral. "They have a whole story about the founder. It's actually really interesting." "Oh, I will," Georgina said. "I love supporting small businesses." The irony was so thick I could have poured it into a mold and sold it as a candle. Georgina loved supporting small businesses. She'd been mocking mine for 9 years. I went home to Santa Fe that night. I drove up I-25 through the dark, past the Sandia Mountains, past the casino lights at San Felipe Pueblo, past the exit for Santo Domingo where Dolores still kept her goats, past the sign for La Bajada Hill where the highway climbs out of the Rio Grande Valley and the air changes, gets thinner, drier, colder. I drove with the windows cracked and the radio off, and I thought about Georgina, holding my candle like it was treasure. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt tired. The specific tiredness that comes from carrying a secret for too long, not because you want it, but because the people around you never gave you a reason to put it down. Maricela called me the next morning. She loves it, she said. She's already posted about it on Facebook. I'm looking at the post right now. She wrote, and I'm quoting, "My brilliant daughter got me the most exquisite candle for Christmas."
Solenn.
Look it up. You're welcome. Of course she did. Paloma. She's going to find out. I know. When she Googles it. When she reads the founder story. Your name is on the website. Your face is on the About page. I know. What do you want to happen? I thought about it. I thought about the farmer's market and the folding table and the 18 bars of soap and the woman who said they smelled like what her grandmother's house should have smelled like. I thought about Dolores and her goats. About Raymond and his hand-blown glass. About Camille screaming when Nordstrom emailed. About the 42 people who come to work every day in a building that exists because I didn't listen when someone told me I was making a hobby with wax and oil. I want her to find out the same way she finds out everything, I said. By looking at something she already has and realizing she never really saw it. Georgina found out on January 3rd, a Friday. Maricela told me later how it happened. Georgina had been burning the desert moonlight candle every night, just like she said she would. She'd posted about it twice more on Facebook. She'd told at least 4 friends. On that Friday, she finally went to the Solenn website to order more. She clicked on our story. She saw the photo of me standing in front of our Santa Fe flagship. She read the first paragraph. Solenn was founded in 2014 by Paloma Vega, a New Mexico native who started making goat milk soap in a Santa Fe kitchen and built it into a nationally recognized luxury fragrance brand. Maricela said her mother called her within 3 minutes. The conversation, as Maricela described it, went like this. Maricela, did you know? Know what, Mom? That the candle, the Solenn candle, that Paloma, your cousin, that she... Yes. How long? A few years. And you didn't tell me? You never asked about her work, Mom. You asked about her soaps. Silence. A long silence. Then Georgina said something Maricela had never heard her say before. Oh God. Oh God. 2 words. 9 years of still making your little soaps compressed into 2 syllables of recognition. Not apology. Not yet. But recognition. The sound a person makes when the ground they've been standing on suddenly turns to glass, and they can see everything underneath. Georgina called me the next day. Saturday morning. I was in the fragrance lab at the Albuquerque facility, working on a new spring blend, yuzu and white tea, and a Moroccan rose absolute that cost $400 an ounce. The lab smelled like everything and nothing, the way a room full of concentrated scent eventually cancels itself out and becomes neutral. My phone buzzed. Georgina. I answered. Paloma. Her voice was different. Smaller. Like it had been washed and hung out to dry and hadn't fully regained its shape. Hi, Tia. I went on the website. I know. 14,000 stores. Yes. Nordstrom. And Anthropologie and Crate and Barrel and about 340 independent boutiques. Silence. Then, I've been buying your candles. I know. For 3 years. The one in my guest room, the Pinion Noir, that's you? That's me. I bought it at a store in Albuquerque. The woman at the register said it was the best-selling candle in New Mexico. I told her I had great taste. She paused. Her breathing was unsteady. Paloma, I have been so cruel to you. I didn't argue. I didn't say no, it's fine, don't worry about it. I let the sentence exist in the space between us, because she was right. You called my work little soaps for 9 years, Tia. You said I'd end up on food stamps. You told my mother you were worried about me, which is family code for I think she's failing. You compared me to Maricela at every Thanksgiving like you were reading a scorecard. And the whole time, I was building something that was right in front of you. You were holding it. You were smelling it. You were posting about it on Facebook. And you still couldn't see it because you'd already decided what I was. She was crying. I could hear it. Not the performative kind. The private kind. The kind that happens when you're alone in your kitchen in Rio Rancho at 9 a.m. on a Saturday, and the thing you've been wrong about for a decade finally catches up to you. "I'm sorry," she said. "I am so sorry, Paloma. I believe you. Can I come see the factory? The store? I want to see what you built." "You can, but not yet. When I'm ready." She asked me one more question before we hung up. "How much is the company worth?" I paused. Not because I didn't know, because I was deciding whether she deserved the number. Then I realized the number wasn't mine to withhold. It belonged to the 42 people who made it real. Our last valuation was $36 million in revenue. The brand itself has been valued considerably higher. I won't give you the exact figure, but it's enough that I'll never need to ask anyone for anything.
"Not you."
Not anyone.
She was quiet.
Then she said, "You know what I keep thinking about? That Thanksgiving when you were 25, and you brought those little soap samples as gifts for everyone. I put mine under the bathroom sink and never used it." "I know. I went and looked for it yesterday. It's still there, under the sink, still wrapped in the brown paper."
"Tia."
I opened it. "It still smells beautiful, Paloma, after all these years." That nearly broke me. Not the apology. Not the tears. The image of my aunt kneeling on her bathroom floor in Rio Rancho, unwrapping a bar of goat milk soap that had been sitting under her sink for 9 years, and finally smelling what had been there the whole time. That image sits in my chest like a stone I can't quite swallow. I wasn't ready for another month. In February, I invited Georgina and my parents and Maricela and Tomas and Renata to the Santa Fe flagship for a private visit. I closed the store for the afternoon. I set out candles on every surface. I lit them all. The room smelled like everything I'd ever created: pinyon and jasmine and cedar and rose and bergamot, all layered on top of each other like a scent autobiography. Georgina walked in and didn't speak for 2 full minutes. She walked around the store touching the shelves, reading the labels, picking up candles, and smelling them one at a time with an expression I'd never seen her wear. Humility. It looked unfamiliar on her, like a coat she'd borrowed from someone else. My father stood by the window looking at the hand-blown glass vessels like they were museum pieces. My mother stood next to me and held my arm. She didn't say anything. She just held on. Georgina stopped in front of a display table in the center of the store. It held our newest collection, a line called Races, which means roots. I developed it over 6 months. Every scent in the collection was based on a memory from my childhood in Albuquerque. The pozole on the stove, the pinyon fire, the chamisa after rain, the dry earth of the South Valley in August, the lavender that grew wild along the acequias. She picked up one called Acequia. She turned it over. On the bottom, in small gold text, it said, "For my mother, who made the house smell like love. And for my tia, who made me prove I could." I'd added that line the week before. I'd gone back and forth about it. Camille told me it was either the most generous thing she'd ever seen or the most savage. I told her it was both, because some truths need to be lit from both sides, like a candle, to be fully seen. Georgina read it. She set the candle down. She looked at me. "You put me on the candle," she said. "I put you on every candle, Tia. You just didn't know you were reading my name." She hugged me. It was the first time she'd hugged me in years without it feeling like an obligation. It was tight and trembling, and it lasted longer than either of us expected. When she let go, her mascara was running and she laughed and said, "This is a $68 candle, and I'm ruining my makeup over it." $72, I said. "We raised the price in January." She laughed again.
"For real this time?"
"We're not fixed."
"I want to be clear about that."
9 years of dismissal doesn't dissolve in one afternoon in a candle store, no matter how good it smells.
Georgina is trying. She's awkward about it.
She overcorrects. At the last family dinner, she told everyone at the table that I was basically the Estee Lauder of New Mexico, which was both flattering and inaccurate, but I let it go because the alternative was worse. She's learning.
Slowly.
The way of flame teaches wax to change shape, with patience, with heat, with time. Maricela and I are closer now than we've ever been. She quit the tech job in Austin and asked me if she could come work for Solen.
I said yes.
She runs our digital marketing. She's brilliant at it. Last month, she showed me an ad campaign she designed that featured the tagline, "Made in New Mexico. Burned everywhere." I approved it immediately. My mother finally Googled the company. She called me and said, "Mija, there are articles about you in magazines I can't pronounce." I told her that was because some of them were in French. She said, "Your father wants to know if you still make soap." I said, "Yes, Dad, I still make soap, just at a slightly different scale." The candle on Georgina's vanity is still Desert Moonlight. She's on her fourth one. She orders it directly from our website now, using a 15% family discount code I set up for her. She doesn't know that the code is LITTLESOAPS. Maricela set it up. I didn't ask her to. Some things are funnier when nobody explains them. Every morning, I drive from Canyon Road to the fragrance lab. I park next to Camille's truck and Raymond's van. I walk through the door, and the air hits me, all of it at once, yuzu and sandalwood and the pinyon resin we source from a family in Chimayo who've been harvesting it for 5 generations. I sit at my bench and I mix. I pour. I test. I light a wick and wait to see if the scent tells the truth. My grandmother used to say that the way a house smells is the first thing people remember and the last thing they forget. She was right. Georgina forgot who I was for 9 years. But she remembered how my candle made her feel the first time she lit it. She just didn't know those two things were connected. Now she does. And the next time someone asks her about her favorite candle brand, she'll say, "My niece makes it." Not because she's proud, though she's getting there. Because it's the truth. And the truth, like a good candle, has a way of filling every room it enters.